Hey guys, so today we have our professor glasses on because I have been watching Professor Jiang Xueqin, and he's been really recommended to a lot of people. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. Predictive history. The channel has probably grown from very few subscribers to more than 500,000 subscribers. So this guy is growing like crazy. He almost gives off like a Jordan Peterson type vibe, but I think his foundation / his fundamentals are different. If I had to sort of put him somewhere, he is a macro historian / a sociologist with some decision theory. So that's how I would describe him. He's an Ivy Leaguer like me, but he went to Yale to study, I think it's English literature. Let me see what he studied. He studied English literature at Yale. So obviously a very smart guy, but his foundations are different than mine. That being said, though, I've been thoroughly enjoying his stuff, and not to say I agree with all this stuff, but I think he's the type of guy, he wants to encourage us to think and discuss, which is something that I think hasn't really happened since a bunch of adpocalypses on YouTube. The last time I think there truly were a lot of good public discourses was before all these adpocalypses. People on all sides, whatever beliefs, have been watching what they say publicly just because of where society is. I really appreciate Professor Jiang, and I wanted to take the opportunity to start a little bit of a series. As I watch the stuff and things come to mind, I'm probably going to have some thoughts, and it'll be good time to brush up on our thinking. So this is video 1. Apologies, by the way, of having a dyslexic moment here. But in his mind, what he wants to show us by the end of his lectures is that these 3 concepts of money, the individual, and the nation state are constructions. What that means is, if you start from the fundamentals, so you start with a bunch of assumptions, you can't build up to these 3 ideas unless you take certain leaps of faith that probably aren't exactly beneficial to you. So that's why he uses the word brainwashing. We've all been brainwashed to believe in these 3 things. So I call them social constructions, but I've never heard him use that term. But I think this is the right term from social science to sort of explain what he's trying to explain with all these things. So in Professor Jiang's mind, money, the concept of the individual, and the concept of the, oh my God, I wrote nation side. I'm so sorry. Nation state. I just realized I wrote nation side. So these are the social constructions that he's going to prove to us by the end of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Jiang, if you watch this, but I looked up some of the people that Professor Jiang recommended us do research on, read ourselves, and a lot of macro historians, a lot of sociologists. Now, I haven't taken any sociology, so for my humanities, my social science knowledge, sociology is my weakness. I think the closest I read a little Weber, Max Weber, and I read a little Hegel. I think you could put those guys into maybe sociology camps, and I read Marx, but I haven't even touched even you would call the surface of sociology. So I'm just like Professor Jiang in his lectures, I'm explaining to you as what my weakness is. I'm not too good with sociology. So a lot of my analysis might be from decision theory, might be from philosophy, might be from economics, political science, history, etc. I will just tell you guys that what I'm going to say about these things are not necessarily what he says. And as we watch and learn more from him, we'll critique and think about and probably re-examine some of our own paradigms along with his paradigms. But for now, I think my own personal biases, I would say definitely nation state is likely a construction. And then today I'm going to explore this, but I definitely have some thoughts about whether money is one of those things that don't derive from the first principles. This one, I'm not going to open this can of worms. This one's so foreign to me. And this, you can tell I'm definitely very Western educated, right? When I heard this, I'm like, huh? So we'll start with this one. And if this video does well, maybe we will talk about the other ones and respond to Professor Jiang in more ways. So let's imagine a society without a concrete definition for money or currency. And let's imagine a society with 2 people, person B and person A. Now, person A has chickens, person B has cows, Now, obviously, cows are bigger and they yield more meat, they yield milk, etc. And they probably take longer to both raise and they have a longer lifespan. So let's just say for these two people, they would say, okay, 4 chickens are a cow. So if person B ever wanted cows from person A, and he can ask and say, can I have it for free, right? But if person A is not feeling generous, then person A is like, okay, well, if you give me 1 cow, I'll give you 4 chickens. And then we've made an exchange, right? This is the concept of value. How do you define value? Well, economists would say, well, the value of something is basically what you're giving up to have it, right? So if there's only 2 things to eat and there's cows and chicken, well, you could say, well, what's the value of a cow? Well, let's define the value of the cow based on the chicken. But obviously, most people can't just eat 2 things, right? So let's just say there's fields of wild grapes and they're both picking grapes. So here we have an assumption here, and I'm going to use John Locke in this. Now, not everyone agrees with this assumption, but I think if you do believe in property, then you do agree with this assumption, which is once you put labor into something, you mix yourself with it. And that's what creates ownership of something. So if I pick the grapes, I'm spending time, I'm spending effort to pick the grapes. And that makes the result of my labor mine. Same with the cow. I'm spending time to raise the cow, to feed the cow, to take care of it if it's sick, etc., etc. If I slaughter it, I have to cut it open, make the meat, etc. So that cow's mine, right? It's one of those fundamental assumptions you have to have. Let's say they're both picking grapes. So let's say maybe one day person B doesn't want chickens or person A doesn't want cow. Well, now you can value your chicken or your cow based on how many grapes it's worth. So let's say 50 grapes is a chicken. 100 grapes or something like that, 120, 130, something. You have to work out based on their preferences. Okay, how many grapes equals a cow? How many grapes equals a chicken? But quickly you can see that you can use something to represent other things. You can use a third thing to represent the value of your primary things. So then we start with these fundamentals and then let's extrapolate more. What's the problem with using chickens or cows or grapes as our measurement of value? Well, one thing I can think of is, what does food do? Food kind of spoils, right? So there's this lack of durability, for lack of a better word. So maybe we need something else that we can put away and then 2 weeks later we can come back to and be like, oh yeah, it's still worth something. So I thought about, well, wood seems like a perfect candidate. Why is wood a good candidate? Well, you can burn it for fuel. You can use it to build houses. And as long as you don't get wood wet or you don't actually burn it yourself or put it among termites or something like that, wood seems pretty durable, right? Between person A and person B, eventually they probably will be like, yes, grapes, this amount of grapes equals this amount of cow equals this amount of chicken, etc., etc. But maybe we'll have something else like wood that we can then just trade that and use that as the standard to go around. So then we don't have to have all these things in our head, just everything is however much wood. Very quickly, you might run into another issue, which is, well, what if some days I don't want your whole chicken? Or what if some days I don't want your whole cow? Let's imagine we don't have refrigerators, we don't have freezers. So what if one day I only want a quarter of a chicken or a quarter of a cow? So very quickly, it gets harder and harder to break things down. So we're going to use this word, divisible. What's the problem with using wood? The thing is, if I have a long beam of wood and I start cutting it up, the pieces don't add up to the sum, right? Unless I have a way of gluing the wood together and it has all the same properties, which it won't. If I cut the wood, the more I cut it, the less value it's going to have. The little pieces that result aren't the same as what we started out with. Maybe wood's not perfect to store and signal the value of all the other things we have in our little economy. And if we extrapolate from this, we also arrived at this word. If I wanted to bring whatever things that I use to measure value, do I want to bring packs and packs of wood? I could, right? Or if you even go back to the cows and the grapes and the chickens, maybe I'll bring my chickens, right? There were a lot of markets back in the day where people literally just exchange stuff. So what I'm saying isn't impossible. These two words go hand in hand, right? Divisibility and portability. So you guys can probably see what I'm trying to get at, but as you guys will see, as I'm trying to get at is there's still a logical jump. And this is why I don't know how Professor Jiang explains this, but I do see what he's saying. Most societies, it's either some kind of metal or it's some kind of fiat currency. And then there's also a third type of thing, which is it's currency that actually is backed by metal, right? So that's non-fiat currency. That's just paper currency. Those are the types of money that's usually in any type of economy. And of course, now we have Bitcoin and all that stuff. But what we're trying to examine here is how do we make that jump? Why is silver? Why is gold? Why is copper? Why is bronze? Why is that money? Some people would say, well, they're scarce, right? They have an aesthetic quality. And because they're scarce and they're usually hidden away in a mountain, you have to mine them. It requires labor to extract, right? So their value comes from scarcity plus the fact that you have to extract them. But now I ask the question, how many things have you done that you put labor in, but doesn't mean it has value? Some would argue that's subjective. If I think it's worth it, it's worth it. It's that simple, right? It's the subjective theory of value. But that argument only goes so far, because if you think it's worth it, but I think it's not worth it, then why would I use something to indicate it has value? You see that? So if you think this is valuable, but I don't think it's valuable, why is it valuable? So again, using this kind of ends justify the means type of argument just doesn't work. A really funny example is, oh my God, I can't believe this example, but think about the types of people who do so much work, usually in pursuit of romance, right? And it's never appreciated by the other side. And the other side's like, oh, okay, all right, that's fine, right? One person's like, oh, I'm doing so much, I should have value. The other person's like, go away, you're annoying, right? That's the perfect example. Just because it takes time to mine gold or silver or something, does that make that valuable? Now, you could also say, well, because they're atomic properties, gold, silver, etc., it's durable, it's divisible, right? It's portable. But those are just properties of it. What use do I have for it? You see this little area that can't be filled in? Can I eat silver? Can I build a house with silver? Maybe I can. Maybe I can make certain things with bronze and gold, etc. But there's this leap, right? There's this leap. And I think these are the types of things that Professor Jiang is going to talk about. There's certain logical leaps you have to take. If you look online, I did a search online, and I was like, why is gold, silver, etc. used as currency? Why is it used as money? And one of the best arguments is because it always has been. Is this way because it's always has been, right? Like, that's not a good argument if you think about it logically, but if you really examine why we use metals, precious metals, as currency or money, sometimes the best argument is because it always has been. Yes, silver, gold, etc., it's more portable, right? It's more durable. It's more divisible. Are those properties in itself so worthwhile? That's why we use it as money, to give a stamp of value to everything else. I don't have the answer. I'm only posing you some of my thoughts and why, after listening to this first lecture, I said, I want to listen more to Professor Jiang, because I want to see how he explains this. So what do you guys think? And Professor Jiang, if you see this, I would love to hear your response. Obviously, your videos are probably going to explain this. I'm, of course, thinking about this from maybe an economics angle, right? It's like, what is value, opportunity cost, etc. And somehow there's this leap to, okay, well, this is what money is. This is why we use it as money. And it doesn't flow completely, right? There's certain jumps you have to do. From this angle, I do agree with Professor Jiang that there's certain things that just doesn't follow from the first principles. I want to encourage everyone, whenever someone suddenly blows up like this, of course, listen, but also critique. And take it as an opportunity to educate yourself and think. This might be the last time we as a society, the world, can get together and really think. I think all of you are looking at where the world is going and being like, are we about to enter certain dark ages? So let's take advantage of this maybe last few years and really arrive at certain things. And maybe we could even stall or prevent certain things that seem inevitable. Looking forward to your comments, and I will have a lot more